Mr. Cardone, thank you for joining us today. I appreciate you taking the time to come interview.
Thank you for allowing me to be here.
So would you like a bottle of water?
Oh, yes, please.
Yeah.
Thanks.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Well, I'm originally not from here, from out of state, out west, southern Utah.
Southern Utah, okay.
Yeah. So I've been teaching for about 7 years. I've been working with this age group for about 11 and a half years. When I was in college, I worked in a residential treatment program for kids in rehab for different reasons or behavior problems. I have lived in Central America for 2 years.
Okay. What country?
Honduras.
Honduras. Yeah.
Although I do like traveling, so I'd like to go visit more places. I enjoy, doing the regular, going out to the ball game, music, spending time with the family. I have 3 kids, and I like bringing them out to different events and spending time with them.
Okay.
I have my master's degree in linguistics. My bachelor's, of course, is in Spanish.
Where'd you get that master's from?
New Mexico State.
Cool.
And I'm not sure, is there anything else that you'd like to know?
Well, so I've got a kid. I've been married for a long time, 19 years. My son's 17. How old are your kids?
I have a 6-year-old, a 3-year-old, and an 18-month.
Okay. And are you living in Longview? You're living in Marshall?
Yeah, we live in Longview. My wife works in Longview. She does the night shift. And we felt coming off the night shift, it's safer for her not have to drive far distances.
She worked in the night shift where?
She's a nurse.
Oh, she's a nurse. Cool.
Yeah.
Does she enjoy doing it?
She does for the most part. I mean, it's like any job. You're gonna have your good and your bad.
Oh.
She does enjoy it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very nice. Night shift nurse. That's a hard job. So
Maybe 12-hour shifts.
jeez.
So it's, basically 2 days she doesn't sleep. Do that 4 times a month, and
Yeah, where are you at? What? Plus the kids.
yeah.
All right. How long have you lived in Longview?
Let's see, we moved to Longview in January of 2017, so been a minute. Maybe
Okay.
it's
Yeah, a little bit, hasn't it? Okay. Well, it's good to get to know you a little bit. Well, let's kind of jump into your experience as working in a residential center, and you've been teaching for 7 years. Where did you teach before this?
So before this, I taught at Marshall
Taught at Marshall.
Independent School District. There for a while. Before I taught at Marshall, I taught just community classes at the College of Southern Nevada.
Okay.
And
Were you certified then, or were you just volunteering?
no, it was, just the community classes, so anybody that wanted to come in. And so there was about 14 people we had, and so we'd try to go over just basic conversation skills and things related to their work. And that's how I'd plan lessons around that.
Okay.
And then
Were you teaching Spanish?
Yeah, Spanish.
Oh, you were teaching Spanish there.
Yeah. It wasn't full-time, there weren't any benefits, so
Yeah.
wasn't too much incentive to stay.
Right. No, I understand that.
So.
Yeah. Well, what is it that attracted you to Tatum?
I've heard really good things. The community is involved, very involved in supporting the school and the school's activities. And that was something that was really interesting to me. The parents would be involved and support their students, be interested in what their students were, or in some cases were not doing, just knowing what's going on in the lives of their children. Smaller school kind of gives it more of a more home feel, I guess you could say, where there's not 1,500 students and there's so many other staff members. You only know one or two other people. So I like the smaller town feeling, I guess would say, just kind of more tight-knit community feel.
Yeah, it's definitely that. I mean, that's been my experience at Tatum is the community support for the school is great, and so I think if you get the job, that's one of the things that you're going to enjoy the most about Tatum. So, all right. Well, let's talk about some of your experiences and being in education. So just in general, looking at your overall experience as an educator in the community college and then your 7 years teaching Spanish, what are a few things that you think that you could bring to teaching here?
Well, obviously experience. And one of the things that I like to do is I don't necessarily like to just open up a textbook and go through it, because I don't feel that necessarily meets the needs of the students. So I try to find and create my own activities and things where we can cover things, but also try to incorporate things that the students would use in real life, or things that they would be interested in. For example, at the last school I was at, we do spoken exams, because I don't think there is a purpose of knowing what words mean if you're not able to use it in a sentence to communicate, because that's what language is about. It's about communicating and understanding what is being communicated to you. So I guess it's just that initiative, intuition, kind of go after and see what are the needs of the students. I mean, obviously, if you have, 100 plus students, it's hard to get to know all of them, especially some of them don't, they're closed off, but I do make an effort to try to get to know my students and their interests and what they like. I try to make it a point to go out whenever there's any, not just athletic events, but if there's any band concerts, or if, the drill team has a show. I try to take my family out, and we all try to go and support the students, because that's part of showing that you do care about them as an educator.
So you mentioned that you like to create your activities, don't necessarily go by textbook, which that's fine with us too. But how would you say you determine whether or not your lesson plans are effective? The lessons you're creating on your own, what are some methods that you use to gauge their effectiveness?
So, I mean, first it's the work that they do. So normally I like to take normally about a week at a time, and focus on one concept. If I can go further than that, so every 6 weeks we'll have vocabulary. At the beginning of class, we go over that vocabulary, because they need to learn more words, what more words mean. We have a spoken exam. They have a list of words, or I should say questions, that they need to know how to answer in Spanish by the end of that 6 weeks. The lessons that, and we review those together in class, and then the lessons that we have are based on parts of, okay, this is the vocabulary, let's change it to, we're talking about different people, I want to talk about myself, or this is part of my spoken exam and what it means and how I can use it. So their spoken exams help a lot with their comprehension of it. Also just regular assignments, is this understood? And we'll do other in-class activities where they'll talk to their peers. And I'm able to go listen, you know, to what they're saying. And that helps me gauge it. I don't know if there is, in any way, even if somebody is using a textbook, I don't think there's a perfect way to determine if they do it or not. I do still give regular tests based off of, okay, this is how we would use the conjugating when talking about so-and-so. Or this is in relation to a Spanish-speaking country. So we still give tests, but so I like to give regular tests based off of like what we've been doing, such as grammar and things like that, but also spoken exams for the speaking, and we'll try to do an activity in there as well, but based off of grading and those things are what we best use. And if we can see when grading, okay, a whole bunch of students didn't do very good on this, we probably need to go back, revisit, maybe come at it from a different angle and present it in a different way.
Okay. All right. So you talked about how, you like to get to know the students, and obviously there's some kids that they kind of build the walls against them, teachers that want to get to know, and so, a lot of those kids also build walls against learning anything. They're just like, man, I don't want to be here. So you're kind of giving us an idea of how you run your classroom academically, but how would you reach, or what are some steps you might take to reach students who are reluctant learners? They're not really interested in being in your class.
Right. Well, I like to try to show them and emphasize how they can use Spanish in the real world. Well, we're in the real world, I should say, in the world outside of school.
Okay.
So that goes back to some of the activities. It'll be like, how do I order food or take an order of food in Spanish if I'm at a restaurant? If somebody is sick, how would we express that they're sick, right? So if somebody can see it, or if, I have some students that are really into cars, so we'll take some time and we'll go over different parts of a car and things like that. So they can see that, and normally they do get involved in those lessons. And sometimes it's just, if they put their head down, just kind of nudging them, like, hey, let's just get this done, get through it, do it right the first time. They don't have to come back. And sometimes it's just, maybe saying hey to them in the hall. And some students, I don't think that necessarily you have to talk to them a lot for them to respect you, as much as like, if you ask them how they're doing, I'm terrible. Like, it's okay to have a bad day.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of the students, as you described, they are probably lectured a lot already and don't want more lectures as much as they want somebody to say, hey, you're right. Sometimes that happens, and it's not the best, but it can get better. And so building up that trust, I think it makes it easier to go back and say, hey, can I help you with this assignment, or do you understand this concept? I think that can go around to it. Every person's going to be different, obviously. Does it work 100% of the time? I can't say yes, but something's better than not even trying at all.
Sure. So, I mean, you said, like you said just now, I mean, everybody's a little bit different. And so we're gonna have different types of learners as far as ability levels. So we're gonna have some SPED kids, we're gonna have kids with different learning disabilities. And then you have students that are more, they might learn more kinesthetically than others. And so how would you, or how have you, give me some, and if you have some examples, that'd be good. How have you adapted your classroom instruction to meet the needs of those learners?
Sure.
Let's talk about just the SPED kids right now. Let's kind of divide that up a little bit. So talk about kids with accommodations, kind of how would you do that?
So normally, so I do seating charts, and after I get, your 504 SPED kids, you need to know first what are their needs or disabilities. And some of them might not do very good with noise, so you're going to want to say, okay, well, this is probably going to be the quietest place in the classroom. Let's put them in an area where they'd have the best chance to succeed. Most of the time, I do try to put those students closer to me, so I'm more accessible to them, and they feel more like open to asking for help. In my experience, even though they're 504 SPED, a lot of times they don't want help, even when it's offered. But if you can look, just kind of glance at their work, check on them, hey, you're doing good on this, or hey, just remember this or that, and we can help change in a different way.
Okay. So kind of give me a description of how you would meet. So same kind of scenario, but now you've got a kid that, let's say for example, may not learn, by sitting at his desk. So how would you meet the needs of those kids?
So for an example, recently what we did is we went over actions, verbs in Spanish. So like I said, try to break things down by weeks and what do we do. So, one day we might do just like a lecture, another day we might do a worksheet. One of the days, one of the things that they did was listening. So there's a recording and they had to listen to it, and then they had the opportunity to find their own picture that represented what was being said. And then the following day we played charades where they had to act it out, and the other people had to guess in Spanish what they were doing. So they got to act it out, what is it that I need to be doing, and get it. We've done other things like Pictionary and games like that as well. Like a Simon says or Diego dice. So it helps them, they can move around.
Okay. Can we get some out of their desks?
Yeah, I try to think, I don't know if I want to be sitting in one of these desks for 7-8 hours a day.
Sure.
So.
Okay. So I'm going to give you a scenario now. Kind of tell me how would you resolve this issue. So several students are unable to complete their homework. Okay. They tell you that they don't understand how to do it. So how would you handle that situation?
In the same class or different classes?
Let's say they were spread out over classes. Okay. A couple of kids in each class, but they were all over your classes.
So first, I would remind them that it's okay to make mistakes. It's better to make mistakes before a test than on the test, because I don't try to do any gotchas on my tests. I make them up from work they've seen on their assignments. I would go over with them what parts do you not understand or what might be confusing, and go over that, do some problems with them, be there, let them tell me and teach me how to go through different problems until, they were able to do it on their own. possible, it's easiest to do it in small groups. You know, if possible, of course, one-on-one is gonna be your best, but they all need to come in during tutorials or something and work things out, together. If there's another student that's a rock star and gets it, I'm not against other students helping them understand it. I'm not saying doing their work and just telling them the answers, because I don't believe in that. But if they can explain it, sometimes if a student can hear it from the mouth of another student, they're able to understand it better.
What would you say your threshold is, or do you have one where you decide that it's time to reteach a concept versus just having kids coming for tutoring or small groups?
So it kind of goes back on, look at their scores, their test scores and things like that. But one of the things that I also try to do is when we learn a new concept, let's try to revisit some of the other things that we've previously talked about. Because I don't want to just talk about one thing and say, okay, done, over, and never revisit it again. But I do try to slide some of those back in periodically with a new concept in what we're doing. So it's revisiting something already familiar that may help the new concept seem easier, but also refresh their memories on the previous concept.
All right. Let's say you've got a student that is a discipline issue. So not quite reaching the point of, well, let me back up. So they're a discipline issue. What are the steps that you're going to take to get compliance out of that student, or to get them to turn from their evil ways, so to speak?
Yeah. Well, first, if I know beforehand, said students, I also try to sit closer to me. If the student's a discipline issue, and you put them in the back corner furthest away from you, you're kind of giving them free rein to do whatever they want whenever your back is turned. So the closer they are to you, it's kind of like keeping them on a shorter leash. Also having a conference with them. If you need to step out in the hall with them, even if it's before class starts, stopping them and saying, hey, this needs to change. If it continues on, which hopefully talking with them changes it. If not, you write a referral, get a hold of the parents. I guess in extreme cases it might, sometimes if it's two people, because in my experience, most discipline issues have been people feeding off of one another's bad behavior. If it gets to that point, just talking, to the counselor and seeing if it's a discipline issue in other classes, what parents think, and trying to have their schedule changed. Not to be mean, but to put them in a better situation to succeed. Because some kids, they just, seems like they can't help but bothering or getting at one another, and that's not the best learning environment for those individuals or the others in the class.
How many referrals did you write last year?
Last year? Academic school year or calendar year?
Okay, school year.
School year? Probably say maybe 8.
Um, so let's talk about a little bit about your experience with other teachers. Okay. So tell me about a challenging experience you had with another teacher and how it was resolved.
Challenging experience with another teacher? I don't know if I've had too many challenging experiences. I guess at the last school, I wouldn't necessarily say it was a teacher in particular, but the overall kind of climate of the teachers was very negative in terms of students' capabilities. And I think that negative mentality, if you look at at an individual and you don't think there might ever be anything positive or any potential, negativity is going to breed negativity. And I think that's a hard cycle to break, and it's a bad habit to fall into, because then you're already setting other people up for failure without giving them a chance for success. So I guess, or eventually I just stopped having lunch with other teachers because they just only had negative things to say. And, unfortunately I'd find myself thinking some more negative things as well.
Right.
I thought, well, that's, you are whatever you're around. But.
So, well, that brings up an interesting question too. You are going to have difficult students. So what is one way that you keep yourself from developing that negative outlook towards an individual student that maybe, you're the ones that really just kind of grate your nerves?
Somebody once said, because there are those difficult students. I'm not saying there aren't, because we've all had our fair share, I'm sure. But you look at it as, what if this student was my own child? I have 3 kids, and there's sometimes when they grind my gears. I still love them though, and I still want them to succeed, even though in a moment, I might not be very happy with them. So as teachers, I don't think we can take anything personally. If whatever students say, I hate your class, or this, whatever it is, like you can't take that personally. So maybe they're having a bad day because of something that's going on in their home life.
Okay. So let's talk about a little further, not just talking about your relationship with former teachers. Tell me about maybe your reaction to a challenging experience that you've had with the previous administration.
Yeah, so I had a student in class once, and essentially she, very nice young individual, and was going through a lot, and somebody said something, and she just broke down. And obviously that's the middle of the class is not a place for an individual to have, but they need their space, right? Because they're already having a hard time. they're not gonna feel better if they have 24 other students just staring at them. So I walked the individual down to the counselor, said, hey, they just kind of need to hang out with you and talk with you about a few things. And not even 3 minutes later, they were back in my room and nothing was resolved. It was a bad situation, and I just feel like the administration didn't have, they would say one thing, and even the students, you know, for example, no earphones in the hallway, or, you know, whatever. Even the students would be saying, yeah, this is gonna last, you know, for a week, 10 days. And it would, because administration, anytime the teachers would try to follow through, they got no help from the administration. The administration wouldn't back them up on it if they wrote a referral or sent them down to the office. Nothing ever happened. And so if you're told, you know, no hats, and the teachers, you know, are saying no hats, but administration doesn't have the backs of the teachers on what they want implemented, students are going to do whatever they want, because they know they can.
So how did you, what did you end up doing with that student? What happened?
She came, so it was kind of in the middle of the class. I just let her kind of sit in a chair by my desk, by herself, and tried to divert everyone else's attention away. I can't remember what activity we were doing, but I just told her to take her time, kind of gather herself and think things through, because obviously it would be a safety hazard. You don't want a student like that to be alone, and you need to know where they're at. And so I thought at the time that would be the best, because I don't want to send the individual to the bathroom where there's could be nobody else, or I didn't want to send them outside of class where there's nobody else to watch after them. So there's
okay. How do you feel about technology?
It can be good or bad, depending on how it's used. I've noticed since I've started having students put their phones up in a designated area, more students turn in their assignments. There's more participation. There is less cheating, which is amazing. There's good, you know, because we have students they all have their own Chromebooks. So first of all, there's no reason to have their phones, no reason to try to start beef or whatever on their social media. But there's great programs, Study Spanish, Duolingo, you know, Quizlet, and Kahoot, all, even YouTube specific videos, are all great resources. So it depends on how it's being used. But if there are things already out there, they're already done, and they work, why try to reinvent the wheel?
How many days a week do you think you probably use technology in your classroom? Well, let's narrow that a little bit. How many days a week would the students be working on their Chromebooks? You said they're 1-to-1 at the school you're at now.
One Chromebook, yeah.
Okay.
One Chromebook per student is what you're saying?
Well, that's what your situation
Yes,
is right now.
So normally, at least once a week minimum, with the potential for more. So I try to do the instructing the first 10-15 minutes of class and give them an opportunity to work on it. That way I can go around the class and see who needs help, who doesn't, what works, what's not. And the students that get done earlier, they can work on their Duolingo. So they might be using their computer every day of the week, whereas students that might take more time, they might only use it, 2 times a week. So it varies by student.
On your lesson plan, one of the things that we require is that you write how you're going to use technology that week. And so if I'm looking at your lesson plan, what can I expect to see as far as the number of days that the students are using their Chromebooks?
So you'd probably have it broken down, and you can see it on the board, right? We're going to go over our vocabulary, we're going to go over our spoken exam. This is our lesson. Then when you get finished, that would be time to work on Duolingo, which is an assignment online, which they'd use their Chromebooks for.
So if we were in your classroom, it would be written on the board like a schedule?
Yes.
Okay.
That's by the day.
Okay. So you write your schedule on the board?
Yes, so students know what we're doing in class that day.
Okay. So let's move from here to, let's say I'll walk into your classroom on a typical Wednesday afternoon. What am I seeing? Let's say I walk in at the beginning of class. What else do your kids do?
The beginning of class?
Yeah.
So at the beginning of class, they would be working on their warm-up. Their warm-up is usually related to that day's lesson. Then after the warm-up, would talk about the answers. We'd go over our vocabulary together as a class. We'd go over our spoken exam together as a class. And then I would introduce this is the concept that we're learning today.
All right, so say I walk in, I come in, and I hang out for the last 10 minutes of class. What am I seeing the last 10 minutes?
So the last 10 minutes, you would hope, well, I would hope, the students would be finishing up their assignments. I don't like to give busy work. I do believe in giving assignments every day. I don't like free days, but I do give them enough time in class where if they're working, they should finish it. So they should be finishing their assignments. And if they're finished, then they should be working on their Duolingo until the bell rings. They stand up or whatever, I tell them to sit back down because they're not going to go crowd over by the door. It drives me crazy and it's a fire hazard.
So we have a lot of different students with a very diverse, lots of different opinions and thoughts about just about everything. You know, we've got a lot of diversity on this campus. And so how would you handle students who are expressing their opinions and that maybe you don't agree with, but they're engaging you in conversation? So what would that look like?
I think students should remember there's a time and there's a place for everything. During the middle of a lesson isn't a time to bring up X, Y, and Z, right? At the same time, I think that students should have the opportunity to express their opinion, and that's something they should probably do maybe in between classes or at lunch on their time. But I'm not here to tell students what I think they should or should not do in different, whatever situation it should be.
Okay. I mean, let's say, so let's take that a step further, maybe to an extreme, but still kind of going back to, a student comes in and they express to you some really far-fetched ideas that this is their belief system. How do you handle that? What do you do? Like you think that the ideas are incorrect, and so.
Well, it doesn't matter what I think. That's the great thing about the United States, is everybody has their own freedom to think how they want. And I would hope that people do think for themselves. And I also think it's a lost concept that just because you don't agree with everybody on everything doesn't mean you still can't respect each other and be nice to each other.
How would you handle students who maybe are from a different culture, and so they're coming into your room and behaving in a certain way that is not what you feel like is the normal, normal is the wrong word. For them, for them culturally it's different, right? So, but they're coming in your room and they're behaving in a way that is maybe disruptive, but for them it's a cultural issue. So how would you handle that? So that they're not being disruptive because they're intentionally misbehaving. Their behavior might be disruptive to the flow of class, but that's just their cultural differences. So how would you handle that situation?
Probably, the last thing you want to do is embarrass them. You probably learn more about the culture, talk to them, why is this going on, what does it have, and if it's something that maybe they can do later, recommend that they do it again later, after school, before school, maybe during lunch. But try to understand their culture and where they're coming from, and just go with, if whatever they're doing is it hurting the learning environment. Because you can't just have somebody coming in yelling and screaming and saying, it's part of my culture or whatever, because you'd have kids that would just say that to say it. But try to learn about their culture and what it's about, and just kind of share with them our expectations that are set by the school and the school student handbook.
Well, do you have any questions for us or for me?
It's the same insurance and benefits as other schools in Texas.
Well, one of the nice things about Tatum is that the school district pays for all of your medical insurance. So that's not something that would have to come out of your paycheck. And so if you're hired, that's one of the benefits that we kind of throw out there to bring people in.
Okay. That's all I had.
All right, well, Mr. Cardone, I appreciate your time, and you'll be hearing from us in a few days. I don't like to leave people hanging, so I'll be letting you know what my recommendation is to the school board here as quickly as I possibly can. There's a few more people that I have to interview, but I appreciate your time, and I hope you have a good afternoon.
All right, thank you.